My name is Lyra March. I'm 44 years old, a retired U.S. Army major, with 2 decades of service, 3 overseas deployments, and 1 shrapnel scar that still burns when it rains. I've held my ground on battlefields most people couldn't pronounce, buried comrades, whose names I still whisper before sleep, and wore the uniform long after the applause faded. But nothing, no firefight, no hostile debrief, no night drenched in sirens and sand, prepared me for the moment my own brother stood up in a courtroom, pointed his finger at me, and said, "She's not even a real veteran." The words hit with surgical cruelty. I remember the dead silence that followed, the way the courtroom froze, how my mother's face stayed perfectly composed, while the judge blinked twice like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. I didn't defend myself. I didn't speak at all. Instead, I reached into the side pocket of my worn leather briefcase and pulled out a thin tan folder. My steps were steady. My heart wasn't. I walked past Ryan, past his lawyer, who had just hours ago tried to intimidate me with a smug smirk, and placed the folder directly in front of the judge. He flipped the first page. His brows narrowed. His voice dropped into something cold and commanding. "No one move. Close the doors, now." Then the courtroom doors swung open, and the sound of military boots striking marble drowned everything else, and just like that, the war I didn't start finally began to end. I hadn't seen the ocean in years, not since the funeral. But when I stepped onto the front porch of the old March house in Mendocino, the air tasted exactly the same salt and pine, with just enough chill to remind me this wasn't a memory. It was real. My father's house, the only place I'd ever felt grounded, now stood like a question waiting to be answered. He died quietly in spring. No drama, no warning. Just didn't wake up one morning in the same armchair where he used to trace my deployment routes on a dog-eared atlas. The will came 2 weeks later. Simple, no frills. Dad never liked complexity unless it was part of a good story or a military tactic. He split the estate between the 3 of us, Ryan, Eli, and me. Ryan inherited the March family business, a modest but reputable hospitality firm. Eli, our youngest brother, received a generous trust for his teaching and art programs. And me, I got this house. The place where he taught me how to read the stars. The place where I stood in uniform the day I left for basic training, still half a child. At the reading, no one looked surprised. Not even Ryan, though his jaw tensed when the lawyer confirmed the house was mine. My mother's mouth formed a tight line unreadable. Eli looked at the floor. He always looked at the floor. For a brief moment, I let myself believe it might end there. We'd all take our pieces, carry our grief in different directions, and walk away without blood. But Marks don't let go easy. A month after the will, a letter arrived. Not handwritten, not personal. It was a packet legal stationery, thick with accusation. Ryan and my mother were suing me. On grounds of fraudulent military records. They claimed I had manipulated our father, with lies, fake deployments, forged commendations, all to secure the house. I read it twice then, once more, sitting at the same kitchen table, where Dad and I used to drink black coffee and talk about nothing. My hands didn't shake. Not then. But my throat felt like it had swallowed gravel. They hadn't just accused me of theft, they had erased 21 years of my life with a single allegation. I called no one. Not Ryan. Not my mother. Not even Eli. He was always the quiet one, the neutral party. A shadow that never chose a side. When I told him I was joining the Army at 18, he just blinked and went back to sketching. No judgment, no encouragement, just silence. So I sat with the betrayal alone. I pulled out every service document, every photograph, every scar I didn't ask for. I didn't cry. That came later. First, I did what soldiers do, I prepared. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't about the house. This was about who I was, and they wanted that erased. But I wasn't going anywhere. The first headline landed 3 days after I filed my official response. Decorated veteran or master fraud local families. Inheritance battle turns ugly. They used my old military photo, the one taken in Kandahar after my second deployment. I'm standing in front of a Humvee. Dust in my hair. Smile too tired to fake. That picture once made my father tear up. Now it sat under a headline that cut through my skin. Then came the talk shows, the blogs, the internet experts who'd never worn a uniform but had plenty to say about mine. The comments were the worst. Stolen valor, fake soldier, dishonors real heroes. Strangers dissected my record with no understanding of what it meant to earn that insignia or carry the names of the fallen in your pocket because they wouldn't make it home. I stopped going to the grocery store. Even the barista at the cafe down the hill, who used to call me Major March, with a grin wouldn't meet my eyes. One morning, a letter from the Veterans Council arrived, not support, but a formal request to clarify your standing due to ongoing controversy. Every day, another cut, another erasure. Ryan's legal team was relentless. They submitted altered timelines, forged emails, even a fake psychological evaluation, claiming I suffered from combat delusions and fabricated experiences for emotional attention. It wasn't just an attack. It was an orchestrated execution of my credibility, my sanity, my place in our family, and my mother. She sat for a televised interview with that same neutral tone she always used when disciplining us as kids. "We just want to make sure everything is above board," she told the camera voice, dipped in rehearsed concern. "My daughter has struggled with truth before. This has nothing to do with money." Of course it didn't. I spent nights lying awake staring at the ceiling of the Mendocino house, the beams still painted the same faded blue Dad said, reminded him of a Mediterranean sky. Sometimes I thought I could still hear his footsteps in the hallway, the clink of ice in his glass, his gravel voice saying, "Truth isn't a show, Lyra. It's a stand you take in silence." And still, Eli said nothing. He didn't visit, didn't call. He existed somewhere between loyalty and fear, a man so good at disappearing, you barely noticed he'd vanished. But silence wasn't protection. It was a choice, and I had made mine. I hired a forensic investigator. I combed through financial records, cross-checked deployment logs, pulled letters from commanders I hadn't spoken to in years. I cataloged proof not to shout back, but to show that I didn't need to yell to be believed. They thought they could shame me into retreat. They forgot that I'd survived people with weapons far crueler than words. This wasn't war, not the kind with bullets and sand, but it was still a battlefield. And I refused to surrender. It was almost midnight when I heard the knock on the back door. Not the front. The back, the same one that opened into the garden where my father used to grow rosemary and wild mint in rusted pots. I didn't expect anyone. I hadn't for weeks. When I opened it, Eli stood there damp from the ocean mist, hands shoved into the deep pockets of a coat I remembered from a Christmas long ago. He looked like a boy who had lost his way home, older, thinner, quieter than ever. "I shouldn't be here," he said. I didn't answer, just stepped aside. He entered the kitchen slowly, like the air itself might break. We sat at the same table, where when we were children, I used to sneak him extra cornbread, and he used to draw battle scenes on napkins instead of eating. He looked at those napkins differently now, as if memory could scald. After a long silence, he pulled a small flash drive from his coat and placed it gently on the table. "What is it?" I asked. "I found it," he whispered, "months ago. I didn't know what to do." Inside were email threads between Ryan and our mother, dated weeks before Dad died. Discussions about modifying the will, digital signatures that didn't match. Financial records showing offshore accounts, some set up under nonprofits tied to veterans' causes, in my name. I said nothing. He looked up, eyes rimmed with guilt. I didn't think they'd go this far. I thought, maybe it was just talk. I didn't want to believe it. Why now? Eli blinked hard. Because they're not just erasing your service. They're using it, profiting from it, turning it into something dirty. And because... He hesitated. "You were the only one who ever stood up for me. That's when I saw it, the boy he used to be. The one who hid behind my legs during storms. The one who once whispered he wished he could be brave like me." "I can't fix it," he said, "but I can give you this." I took the flash drive. It felt heavier than anything I'd carried through 20 years in uniform. He stood to leave. "Eli," I said quietly, "if you choose silence again, I'll understand. But just know truth doesn't wait forever." His shoulders dropped, neither do regrets. When the door closed behind him, I sat in the dark kitchen with only the hum of the refrigerator and the soft scent of rosemary lingering in the air. I didn't cry. Not yet. I didn't rage either, because this wasn't the moment for that. It was the moment I realized the people who should have protected my name were the ones trying to bury it. And the brother I thought I'd lost might be the only one who hadn't chosen a side until now. I opened my laptop, plugged in the flash drive, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone. The courthouse was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, but in air, too still, too sterile. The kind of cold that settles into your bones when you know you're walking into something final. I wore a navy suit. No medals, no uniform. Just the version of me they always tried to ignore. Plain, quiet, watchful. I sat at the plaintiff's table with my attorney, a woman named Holland, who never raised her voice and never lost her place. Across from us, Ryan polished as always in a tailored gray suit. My mother beside him, in soft cream wool, her hands folded in her lap like she was preparing for church not court. Eli sat a row behind them, silent, still unreadable. The judge was older, slow-moving, but sharp-eyed. His gaze swept the room with the kind of skepticism that comes from years of seeing people lie with confidence. He nodded once. And then it began. Ryan's lawyer went first, his voice smooth rehearsed, too perfect. He spun a story of a grieving family, concerned about a sister who had returned home after years of estrangement, conveniently just in time for the reading of a will. He spoke of inconsistencies in my military history, gaps in records, questions about my mental state. He used the word unstable more than once. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue that remained suspiciously dry. None of it surprised me. I'd studied every word they might use, every twist they might attempt. What struck me was how familiar it felt. The language, the soft, poisonous calm. It was the same tone my mother had used when I was 12 and came home with a bloody lip after defending Eli from a boy at school. "Why must you always escalate things, Lyra?" she'd said. "Can't you ever just let things be escalate?" That was always their word for me. When it was my turn, Holland stood. Her style was different. She didn't try to charm the judge. She let the facts do the speaking. Certified military documents, deployment orders, video testimony from a retired colonel who had served under me, medical records confirming injuries sustained in combat, not imagined in delusion. I didn't look at Ryan. I didn't look at my mother. I kept my eyes on the judge, even when Holland pulled out photos of my unit, the ones I hadn't wanted anyone to see me crouched beside a burning Humvee, face streaked with ash and blood. Proof that I had been there. That I had survived what they refused to believe. Then Ryan took the stand. He raised his right hand, swore the oath, and looked directly at the judge with that same confident gaze he used when charming investors. He spoke calmly, even kindly. "I don't want to hurt my sister," he said, "but I have to do what's right for the family." He accused me of manipulating our father, of exaggerating my service, of using trauma to gain leverage. He even said I'd once asked him to help cover for a failed deployment, something that never happened. I felt my stomach turn not because of the lies, but because of the ease with which he told them. There was no hesitation, just certainty. My mother followed. Her testimony was softer, controlled. She spoke of concern, doubt. How hard it was to watch me change after the war. How maybe I believed the stories I told. Maybe I needed help, not inheritance. I watched her say these things as if I hadn't called her from a base in Afghanistan to say happy birthday, as if I hadn't sent her letters she never answered. Behind them, Eli sat still, not looking at anyone. His hands clenched tightly in his lap. I didn't need him to speak. Not yet. But I needed to know if he would. That night, I sat alone on the back porch of the Mendocino house, wrapped in one of Dad's old flannel blankets. The stars were out clear and brutal, and the ocean below sounded like it was gnawing at the cliffs. I hadn't spoken a word since the courtroom. The lies weren't what hurt most. What broke me open was the way they all acted like it wasn't personal, like this was just a family disagreement over paperwork and perception. Not my life, not my blood, not my truth. I heard the gate click just after midnight, soft steps hesitant. I didn't turn until he was almost beside me. Eli. He didn't sit right away, just stood near the railing staring into the dark. They told me if I said anything, she'd never speak to me again, he murmured. Said I'd be tearing the family apart. I didn't reply. I wanted him to keep talking. He swallowed hard. But it was already torn, wasn't it? I nodded. He looked down at his hands. If I testify, if I confirm what's on that flash drive, she'll never forgive me. Neither will Ryan. A beat of silence. Then you'll lose them, I said, but you won't lose yourself. He turned to me. In the porch light, his face looked older, worn, like the weight of silence had finally left bruises. I don't want to lose you too, he said. I looked at him steady. You won't, not if you choose truth. He nodded slowly, not dramatic, no declarations. Just that one motion, small and final. When he left, I stayed on the porch, eyes on the sky, breath held in that thin space between fear and hope. Tomorrow, I would find out if he meant it. The next morning, the courtroom felt different. Not quieter, just heavier, like everyone could sense something was about to shift. When Eli's name was called, Ryan leaned forward. My mother stiffened. I didn't move. I just watched my brother rise from the bench and walk slowly, deliberately toward the witness stand. His hands trembled as he took the oath. Then he looked at me and began. He spoke softly at first, voice barely above a whisper. But each word was clear, and with each sentence, his spine seemed to straighten. He confirmed the emails, the financial records, the will amendments. He described how he had discovered the documents accidentally, how he'd struggled for months, afraid of what it would mean to speak up. Then he said their names. Ryan, Judith March, our mother. Gasps rippled through the room. My mother's face turned a pale, angry gray. Ryan's jaw tightened. His fists pressed white against the table. But Eli kept going. He spoke of the non-profit accounts that didn't exist, the fund transfers in my name, the documents that had been printed from Ryan's own email server. He didn't embellish. He didn't accuse with emotion. He just told the truth piece by piece, until it stood in the center of the courtroom like a burning flag. When he finished, he didn't look at the judge. He looked at me. And that was when I knew the tide had turned. As he stepped down, he passed my seat. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. But in that moment, I understood I had not stood alone after all. The courtroom was silent when I stood the tan folder in my hand. I didn't look at Ryan or my mother. I didn't need to. Their fate was already unraveling. I walked to the judge's bench and laid the folder down, every forged document, every fraudulent transfer, every email that proved exactly who had been lying and why. The judge flipped through the first few pages. His eyes darkened. Then came the words I'd waited months to hear. This court is now in possession of evidence indicating criminal fraud involving federal benefits document tampering and obstruction of justice. Lock the doors! Military police will secure the room! The doors closed with a sharp finality. Ryan's lawyer dropped his notes. My mother stared straight ahead, unmoving. The smirk on Ryan's face collapsed. I sat down and folded my hands. No smile, no satisfaction, just stillness. The judge called for immediate federal review. The civil case was suspended. The house, my service, my name restored. Outside, the sun was too bright. Reporters shouted, cameras flashed. I didn't answer a single question. I walked past them all down the courthouse steps and into a world that had tried to erase me and failed. Later on the porch of the Mendocino house, Eli sat beside me. We didn't talk about court or family or what came next. We just watched the tide roll in, and for the first time in years, I breathed without armor. I hadn't fought for a revenge. I fought for truth. And the truth had stood.